This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, super practical.
I'm not telling people to have a mistress. I'm teaching you, learn the lesson from the people who have a mistress, because there's many business lessons that apply.
Pious.
There's a part in the book of Revelation where Jesus says, I want you either hot or cold. I'm spewing lukewarm churches out. And I think it's a good way to look at your list.
Romantic to his very core.
Once in a while, I'll give my girl a present, like a Snickers bar or something.
And totes tender.
If someone asks you to walk on eggshells, smash the eggshells and let the chips fall wherever they may.
Adored by feminists everywhere.
It takes a strong woman to admit when she's wrong.
Not a judgmental bone in his entire body.
I look at all the free information people give just on Facebook and I go, what a bunch of time hose.
Has a PhD in armchair philosophy.
In the land of dumbasses, the smartass is king.
You'll never meet a more sensitive guy.
If you really care about people, you shame the hell out of them. And this is Ben Settle of the bensettle.com podcast, wishing everybody a very Merry Christmas, especially if you don't celebrate Christmas. I'm wishing you a Merry Christmas.
A very Merry Christmas.
A very Merry Christmas. I am going to be like the annoying Walmart cart getter who wishes you a Merry Christmas and you get all pissed off because, I'm sorry, Christmas. Well, here's the problem. And there's no way around this, Jonathan. There's just no way around this. If you live in the United States, Christmas is a federal holiday. So you kind of have no choice. If you don't, if you can't, if they don't let you go to work, you're celebrating whether you like it or not. Okay. I'm sorry. You just are. And I know there's a lot of pagans out there and a lot of people who don't believe Christmas. That's fine. Or people are going to like tell me how it's been paganized and the Christmas. I know all that stuff. Okay. And I could do a whole podcast on what really happened and what dates and all of that. But too long didn't read it, Jonathan, for everybody. Basically, mathematically, this is very easy to figure out if you have the right scholar to show you. And if you understand the ministrations of the ancient Levites and all that, you know that what happened was the conception happened on Christmas or Christmas Eve, depending on how you ask. And the actual birth of Jesus would have been around September 29th, sometime in the fall. And there's a lot of, this isn't disputable. It's very easy to look up. And so I know that. So when I wish you a Merry Christmas, I'm really wishing you a Merry Conception. Okay. So there you go. All right. And I know there's people need to do some angry push-ups now because how dare he wish me a Merry Christmas when every other marketer out there is saying Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever else is going on, because they don't want to just narrow it down. I'm not inclusive. Okay. I'm very exclusive. Okay. I exclude I only care about my own on this. And that's the way it's going to be on the bensettle.com podcast. We're very Christmas friendly here. And we don't believe in Santa Claus. But we do believe in giving presents.
It's a Christmas safe space.
On that note, and we do, by the way, I would make a hell of a Scrooge. So I'll tell you what, we are very Scroogish here, and Grinchish for that matter. The Grinch to me, Jonathan, is the hero of Christmas time. Like he was my favorite. And every Christmas I do an email talking about the Grinch's marketing skills and all that. And it's never changed. It's never going to change. He was quite the marketer, if you understand it. So anyway, moving on to something completely different. Now that I've offended most of my audience, hopefully. So it was September of 2002. And obviously it must have meant something to me for me to remember this so distinctly. I had just started in this industry, Jonathan, to become a copywriter that February of 2002, I believe. It was February of 2002. Or January or February of 2000. I can't remember. It was one of the two. And so that October, and I had no money at the time, by the way. Literally, it was a stretch for me to spend the $8 to buy The Ultimate Sales Letter by Dan Kennedy. Like, he was the only book I had at the time. And I read it like 8 times straight. I was so infatuated. It's such a great book. Still is. It's just one of the best. So but that book sold me on wanting to get his No BS newsletter, even though $19 a month at the time was a lot of money for me. I mean, it was like, holy crap, how am I going to afford this? That's how broke I was. So broke. I was so broke as a joke, as they say. It wasn't even a joke coming. You know how like they'll say I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. I didn't even have the pot to piss in. Okay. I didn't even have a window to throw it out, a pot to piss in. I didn't even have like a house to piss in it. I had to go outside of the outhouse, figuratively speaking. In fact, at the time, I lived in this little cabin. I just moved out of the office that I used to live in this office. I just moved into this little cabin like on this 40-acre property, which is like full of bugs and mice and all this stuff.
Ooh.
It was really not the most fun place, but it was better than an office. But I had no money. But I read this. I read so I opened that first issue, and I was like, it was like magic. It was like it was the coolest thing I'd ever read. That first issue, that September 2002, No BS Dan Kennedy newsletter. And especially the last page. He used to do these things called the back page. Now, the back page was like his personal thoughts on the world or what's business, whatever. It was just something completely philosophical usually. And it was about the myth of security. Now, this was September of 2002. And he was writing that, and he goes, we're on the 1-year anniversary of 9/11. So that's how far back we're going here.
Wow.
And he's like, and he was talking about how, and it was really powerful. He was talking about how the myth of security and how everybody thought they were secure until that happened. Even though there was precedent, Jonathan. You had Pearl Harbor as a precedent. You had the bombing of some of our embassies as precedent.
Even the World Trade Center got hit once before.
The World Trade Center? Yeah. That and not Columbine. What was the one in Oklahoma? What was that one?
They called it,
whatever that was.
Yeah. The Oklahoma City bombing's all I remember.
Yeah. So there was precedent for this, right? But people just, for whatever reason, being human beings, or maybe just Americans, because, hey, America, nothing bad happens here. Because we've been a very spoiled country. You know, who knows what will happen at the time of this recording, John. If something happens between now and then, this is going to be a weird episode. But people say it's insensitive. But the point is this, there was no security. People thought they had security and then realized it was taken away from them. And then he talked about how, even though there was precedent for it, and he said there is no security. And he's talking about, and then he goes into financial security. And this is back in the Enron scandal days, right? Remember that was around 2002. Yeah. Everybody thought they had their money secure and their nest egg and all that, and everything was great. But then it was all taken away from them in a blink of an eye because they found out it was just this criminal organization that stole all their money. They were financially secure one minute, wiped out the next. Happens all the time. He talked about how this happens in business. Entire businesses went out of business because certain medias were taken away. So, think about that. We have an episode coming up. Add this because of the way we recorded these things. We have an episode coming up where I talk about this a little bit, about how important like the medias are, and you owning the media, your own media. Media's been taken away. 1 minute, for example, infomercials were allowed, and then suddenly they were outlawed. And people who were relying on infomercials went out of business. Then they came back. There were attorney generals at the time, I don't know if they still are or not, that wanted to outlaw flipping of houses or even joint ventures between certain professional organizations. Think of copywriting. People don't realize this, but, especially the people who think copywriting was invented when Facebook was invented, like it never existed before then. It hasn't been around for like 100 years. People don't realize that before the internet and all that, there were fights at the the court level. And I don't know if it went to the Supreme Court or not, but the late, great Gene Schwartz went to bat for everybody. He took it to one of the higher court levels, and it may have been the Supreme Court. I just don't know the full facts on this, but it was one of the higher courts where people were suing advertisers or copywriters and all this because, they couldn't say what was in the book because it might be misleading or construed as that. Well, he went there and said, look, if it's in the book, freedom of speech says I should be able to say what's in the book if I'm writing an ad for it, and that was a big battle. I mean, you imagine how many people would be getting sued right now if that hadn't gone on? You could sue the copywriter for the advertising and all that because something was construed as misleading or whatever. But it's not misleading if it's from the book and the product you're actually selling it from what I understand. Now I have to make the obligatory, I'm not a lawyer thing going. But this is the way I understand it. If it's in the product, you should be able to write it in the advertisement because they can't suppress your free speech to write the book, although they have. In fact, one author, I don't know, this was many years ago, wrote a book about how to pay, get out of paying federal taxes, and apparently that book was illegal. So I guess there's certain limits to free speech. But the point is that's one point is it can be taken away. People say, well, yeah, copywriting's fine now. Well, maybe it won't be. How do you know down the line you're not going to have to get a bureaucrat's okay to run an ad? People say that will never happen. Well, history says you're wrong. It very well could happen and probably will one day. Or if you're a coach or a consultant, maybe you won't be able to put a podcast out there without having it get run through a lawyer every time. Yeah, Ben, that'll never happen. Well, historically, that's what happens. If you live in America, you just live in a very spoiled country where your biggest worry is somebody wishing you a Merry Christmas at Walmart. Well, there's like a lot of countries you can't say a lot of stuff. So that's my whole point, and that's what he was talking about. The security doesn't exist. What you rely on now could be taken away from you tomorrow. It has happened. It will happen. It may not even be the government taking away from you. It could be It could be Facebook changing their rules if you rely on Facebook ads. It happened to people who got Google slapped. One day they're making tens of thousands of dollars a month, and next they're done because Google slapped all their ads and took them down. And now they paid for the ads, but the ads are gone, and now they can't even make their money back. I mean, this is what happens. This is history. You know, the word entrepreneur, I believe, is French, Jonathan. And if you people give the French a lot of hard time, like, oh, you know, they're so anti-capitalist. But if you think about it, they've seen these ups and downs. They've seen the Wild Wests and all this. They've seen their version of the internet where it was like the Wild West and there was no regulation. And now all of a sudden they overcompensate. And that could happen in any country, to any one of us. Yes, you in America too, as you celebrate this Christmas. So that's my point. And he talked about, and there's the fallacy of security in personal relationships. How many people are convinced they're with their little unicorn, the one, the soulmate and all that, who've been divorced, you know? And Dan Kennedy used himself as an example. He's like, 1 minute, you know, my wife and I, because he'd just gotten a divorce at the time. And he's like, you know, I thought there was nothing we could have done to get, you know, through any problems. I was wrong. And think about that. Millions of people get divorced. You think you're immune to it? If you let your guard down, you get complacent. Point is this, it can be done. Anything can be taken away from you. To paraphrase my concealed carry instructor, which we do have the freedom for that at least, thank God, he said, you can only control what you're going to do. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You're going to do what you're going to do. The judge is going to do what the judge is going to do. The bureaucrats are going to do what they're going to do. The lawyers are going to do what they're going to do. All you can control is what you're going to do. And this is the point of what Dan Kennedy was saying. The only security there is in your ability to produce. And you know, barring any kind of, you know, illness that prevents you from doing anything, debilitating illness, this is all you really have. That's the only thing that can't be taken away from you is your ability to produce. And so and Dan Kennedy's whole point of that was you should spend a lot of time and all of your energy, and I would say make it your mission to make that ability to produce stronger, to excel at it, to become the best you can at it, to always be feeding it, nurturing it, strengthening it, sharpening it all the time. You know, a lot of people, Jonathan, don't do that. One of the reasons to write daily emails is for no other reason to make yourself better at communicating so that you have that ability to produce sales through writing. Copywriting is very much an ability to produce. And if you were a copywriter, you should be that should be your goal every day, to become better at that, to nurture it constantly, to feed and water it, to make sure you're always got that ability to produce so that if everything's taken away from you, you can at least go get a client and write an ad and make some money back. Selling face-to-face sales is another ability to produce. You know, I'm not going to say it's my main thing, but for people, it is. If it's something you're good at and you like doing, you should sharpen and hone that. Become great at it. Selling from the stage is another ability to produce. There's people who can make very good livings just speaking. And and you should, if that's something, that's any ability to produce. Email is an ability to produce. Creating podcasts is an ability to produce. Speaking in general is a great ability to produce. Phone sales is an ability to produce. Being a traffic generation guy or gal is a really good ability to produce. Jonathan, it is so hard to find traffic people for hire who know what they're doing. Have you ever noticed this?
Yeah.
Like they don't make them so. Why would they? You know, it's kind of like, this is how I think it's going to start working with copywriters too. The ones who understand that, like, why am I spending all of my time and energy and talent in this client's business to bring him and his wife a lifestyle and his family and kids a lifestyle when I could just be selling my own products and bring my family a lifestyle? Oh, but here's what they do. See, the smart clients are tricky. The smart clients are very tricky. And I'm not going to name names here, but there's some very big direct marketing companies that purposely understand that. They know this for a fact, because I've talked to their copywriters. And the copywriters have all told me, because I asked them this, because I've spoken and done things with some of these companies. And I've asked the copywriter, so why, like, you know, you're good at writing these ads. Why don't you just do your own stuff? I'm like, well, you know, to be honest, word for word, Jonathan, you know, they pay me just enough royalties to keep me happy.
Wow.
It's a scary thing, man. It's no different than going to a job, and it's just comfortable enough where you don't want to find a new one. A lot of stuff gets done through discomfort, by the way. Do you know we would not have running water if it weren't for discomfort? We wouldn't have cars or planes if it weren't for discomfort. We wouldn't have probably a lot of stuff. We wouldn't probably have the internet if it weren't for discomfort. You know, we wouldn't have reclining chairs and remote controls, Jonathan, if it weren't for discomfort. The important things in life. Wouldn't have cell phones if it weren't for discomfort. Computers if it weren't for discomfort. Discomfort, you got to let yourself be a little uncomfortable if you're a little too comfortable right now, if you want to really have a burning desire to make your ability to produce stronger than what it is. If you're at a job, you can make yourself, you know, here's how you apply this for your job, is you need to make yourself indispensable at your job, which, you know, I'm not saying I'm pro-job or anything, but if that's where you're at and you're scared of getting fired, think of ways to make you indispensable. That's your ability to produce. So, Jonathan, everybody has an ability to produce. They just have to hone it. And it can't be something you just want to do. Well, I hear money is real estate's where the money. I'll get really good at that. No, if you don't like it and you're not into it, you're never going to do the work and make the sacrifices to be the best at it. So you got to be really honest. There's a lot of people, for example, Jonathan, who think they want to be email people, but they're just not because they love YouTube too much. Well, I say then be the video person. Go become the best at selling with videos. But that ability to sell, the ability to produce is the number one thing you should be honing, the thing you should be strengthening, the thing you should be spending your time on, not another stupid, bright, shiny object. Here's how to get engagement on Facebook or whatever. No, how to sell. Direct response marketing specifically. Take that ability to produce and you can adapt it to anything. The same skills I use in email, Jonathan, the same thing, it's all communication at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I might be an email guy and all that, but at the end of the day, I'm always honing my communication skills. Whatever I do in my sales letters, the same thing I do in my email. Whatever I do in my emails, the same thing I do in face-to-face and negotiating. Same thing I do there is what I do if I'm speaking on stage or if I'm on my podcast like this. I talk the exact same way. I persuade the same way, and so it is. So whatever it is that your ability to produce is, and only you know what it is, strengthen it, hone it, and sharpen it like it's a sword that's going to save your life, because maybe one day it will. And so, Jonathan, I hope that is not too heavy for a Christmas time podcast, but hopefully people take it to heart. And maybe by next year, if you're struggling, you will have a much merrier Christmas. Who knows? Certainly my Christmas that year, 2002, sucked. So whatever. There we go. But I honed my ability to produce since then. So there you go. That's all I got. Next week, for the New Year's, special New Year's bensettle.com podcast, I am going to talk about, I'm going to just leave it. I'm not going to even say it because there's no way I can tease it where it sounds, it's not going to do it justice. So I'm just not going to say it, but it's going to be a special New Year's one. And that's all I got.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. Another bensettle.com podcast is in the can. Merry Christmas. We'll be back next week.
You've been listening to the bensettle.com podcast. To download yourself a free issue of Ben's prestigious $97 per month email players newsletter, which is going to show you 24 ways to write emails people eagerly read, click, and buy from, head on over to www.bensettle.com. Well, off you go. You know it makes sense.
This is the podcastfactory.com.